Hello there. I thought it rather strange that the Tory government would want to break its own election pledges so soon and so easily over increasing national insurance contributions. Until I read the Coronavirus Act again. As per usual, please like, subscribe and comment below. And when subscribing, please do press that little bell, but also select the all option, or you won't get any notifications when I publish a new video. It's now well known that the government is floating the idea of a 1 or 2% increase in national insurance contributions to pay for the massive and fast-growing NHS backlog due to the effects of the pandemic, as well as for paying for social care into the future. And I found it strange they would choose national insurance as the vehicle for raising the extra money, over increasing income tax or starting a whole new tax. Well, the answer may well lie in the Coronavirus Act itself, because in sections 72, 73 and 74 of that Act, the government can quickly and easily make changes to national insurance contributions, and importantly, they don't need to produce an actuarial report to do it. So, no need for actual numbers to get in the way, which would mean that the government could hide all sorts of costs in any rise without having to explain them properly. And further, it seems they can raise it by any amount they like, without needing an Act of Parliament. As, although I'm no expert here, my reading of this is that the Coronavirus Act also removes the statutory limit under the Social Security Administration Act of raising contributions using secondary legislation to a maximum of 0.25%. That limit goes. Here's what the coronavirus explanatory notes say on all of this. The Act temporarily modifies the existing procedures around introducing national insurance contribution changes in order to respond quickly to the COVID-19 outbreak if required. The Act removes the statutory requirement that a report from the Government Actuary Department accompany secondary legislation implementing rate changes. Then it explains how it would be introduced as law. The Act also provides for the secondary legislation to be subject to the negative procedure in Parliament rather than the affirmative procedure. The temporary modifications will last for 2 years from the day the bill receives royal assent, the 25th of March 2020. The negative procedure means the rules would be changed and in force before the Houses of Commons or Lords get to vote on them, although they could still vote it down as long as they did so within, I believe, 40 days. But it gives the government lots of party whip arm twisting time. And the note goes on to explain how they could amend, how much is paid and by whom. Sections 143 and 145 of the Social Security Administration Act 1992 provide that orders may alter the rate of contributions payable by employees, employers and the self-employed. Section 5 of the National Insurance Act 2014 provides that regulations may be made to alter the amount of the employment allowance and who qualifies for it. The whole thing could be done by statutory instrument very quickly, without having to bother the actuarial department for a report. And once the money is sorted, I'd assume it makes the rest so much easier to get through later. Now, although the explanatory notes say these clauses are to address issues caused by the coronavirus, the clauses themselves within the Act appear to me to say that the temporary rules apply to any changes that are made while the Coronavirus Act is in force. Now, if the changes are done this way, MPs and Lords would be voting blind with no actuarial report and voting after the fact of the new rules being put in place. And these are far-reaching changes that I think would normally require an Act of Parliament to achieve. So this must not be allowed to happen. It would be a hugely cynical move that no previous government, I think, would have dared contemplate. But these are interesting times, as the Chinese would say. So I would not put anything past Boris Johnson at all. And if it does transpire they're planning on doing this, then it will show what a slimeball bunch they really are. So how do we ensure the government does this properly and doesn't use the Coronavirus Act clauses to force through such fundamental changes to our tax system? But before I get on to that, I just want to say a massive thank you to all my Super Thanks Patreon and PayPal supporters, as well as those that do buy a mug with my mug on it. Links in the descriptions box below. You all really do help me keep this channel going. Now, the most obvious way of ensuring the government can't use these clauses to cynically force through NIC changes is if MPs do not renew the Act when the 6-monthly renewal vote comes before them in the next couple of weeks. But here I also have to warn people that the wording of the motion under the 6-month parliamentary review is that the temporary provisions of the Coronavirus Act 2020 should not yet expire. Firstly, meaning that MPs would have to vote in the no lobby to cut it short. But secondly, that it only mentions the temporary parts of the Act. That's right, not the whole Act. Even if MPs vote no to renewing this Act, much of it stays in place and in force permanently. Like indemnity for health service activities, for example. But a no vote would put the kibosh on the NIC clauses because, as far as I can see, they are only temporary. So getting your MPs to vote down the Coronavirus Act would be one way of stopping a rushed NIC change. Then the other way, of course, would be to get MPs and Lords to vote against the statutory instrument that introduces the new rules. Although voting down something after it's come into force might be harder to get people to do than voting it down beforehand. And the other way would be to get Tory rebels to kick up a shitstorm and tell Boris that this must go through the proper traditional channels, or he's toast. Now, a word of caution. What I've outlined above may be way off the mark, and I do hope I'm wrong here. But when emergency legislation allows governments to do things, do not be surprised when they use the powers given to them to the full and beyond, if they can get away with it. But Parliament returns to normal functioning next week. The remote stuff and special voting rules all disappear. The Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle, has explicitly said that. And that in itself is surely reason enough to ditch the Coronavirus Act. If Parliament is fully back to normal, then why not everyone and everything else? But it is also a cast iron reason to make sure that things like these national insurance clauses in the Coronavirus Act aren't abused by a cynical Tory government by voting the Coronavirus Act out. So what's your opinion on these Coronavirus NIC clauses? Please like and comment below.